Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Hope you're all having a brilliant weekend so far. I mean, it could be better. Arsenal could have held on and taken all 3 points from the Stadium of Light. And if that had happened, well, this would have been quite the Sunday, wouldn't it? You'd have been able to sit back on your sofa, put your feet up and enjoy Manchester City and Liverpool going head to head without being that fussed about the outcome. Unfortunately, because we have dropped a couple of points, and I know there'll be people that sort of leap to Arsenal's defense and say, it's not 2 points dropped. It was a really, really tough game. We did brilliantly to get ourselves back into it in the first place. Actually, when you zoom out, when you look at the bigger picture, it's a decent draw. I think when you are winning a football match on the 93rd minute and you don't go on to win it, you are going to feel an overarching disappointment. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that Arsenal were terrible. I don't think that Mikel Arteta should be sacked. I don't think that players should be dropped. I don't think this game really needs that kind of depth of a post-mortem where we're sort of like really kind of hammering in on certain individuals or certain aspects of the performance. I think we're going to break it down on this pod, but I just think this was one of those days, and you got the feeling that it was one of these days quite early on as well. I did anyway. You watched the way that the game started. There was no flow to it. There was no rhythm to it. There was no tempo to it. It was really, really stop-start. Sunderland clearly had sort of worked on matching us physically. They did that in a way that very few teams are able to do at the moment, by the way. And they made life really, really difficult for us. So, yeah, I'm going to sit and talk about things on this episode that I think we could have done better. I'm going to sit and talk about ways in which I think we could have seen the game out. And I'm going to talk about some of the manager's decisions when I talk about that. I'm going to talk about some of the player actions. We're going to cover it all. But my point here, I guess, at the beginning, and I want to put this message across nice and early, is that at least for me, what we've seen yesterday in terms of the outcome shouldn't detract away from the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that Arsenal had won 10 games on the spin. The bigger picture is that Arsenal were not conceding goals. If you concede a couple of goals, by our standards, that sounds really, really bad and really, really damaging. But to concede 2 goals across that stretch of games, actually, bigger picture, it's not that bad at all. And so I think there is a danger of overreacting after a game like this. I think there is a danger of falling into that trap whereby you believe that everything's broken and everything's wrong when that is not the case at Arsenal right now. Now, there is a chance that Manchester City or Liverpool could eat into our lead today. And that is a situation that we could have avoided had we held on. And all that today would have been was a day where we could potentially benefit even further. We stand to lose out a little bit. And my worry is Manchester City winning. They're at home. And if Manchester City win and they can close that gap on us, I mean, we still got a decent cushion. But, you know, it's frustrating because of the situation that we found ourselves in so late in the game yesterday. But there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of things to cover. We'll talk about the, I beg your pardon, the way we kind of seek to see the game out, the lack of substitutions from Mikel Arteta, which I think a lot of people feel contributed to us running out of gas and maybe switching off a little bit at the end. We can talk about the refereeing performance, which was one of the poorest I've seen in quite some time. And I'm not saying that we should all point the finger at the referee, and the referee is the reason that Arsenal didn't get all 3 points. No, first and foremost, you got to look at the things that you can do better and the things that you can control. But that was a really bad refereeing performance. It was one whereby one club were allowed to get away with just kind of pushing that line in terms of what's acceptable on the physical side of the game, and the other club were pulled up for every single little petty offense that took place. And that's where I struggle. Inconsistency is the thing that frustrates me most, I think, when I look at refereeing performances and when I sort of analyze them, that's the thing I can't get my head around. It's the thing I can't live with. Your threshold is higher than other referees or lower than other referees, no problem. But at least make sure that you apply that same level across the board. And I don't feel like Craig Pawson did that. So look, we'll get into the specifics of the game, the ins and outs of the game. Of course we will. But as I say, my overarching feeling is one of disappointment. I can't help it. If you're winning on the 93rd minute, having come from behind in what was a real battle and a real difficult evening for us, then, you know, you've got to win it. You've got to see it out. And if you don't, you will be frustrated and you will be disappointed. Had we hung on, it would have significantly improved our chances of winning the Premier League title. I really do believe that. Even at this early stage in the season, it felt like a really big weekend. But having drawn it, and given that City and Liverpool can't both win today, I think what it's done is slightly sort of diminish our chances, but not significantly diminish our chances. And so I think, you know, we stood to gain a lot more than we stand to lose because of the cushion that we already have in place. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it, glass half full and all that. And when you think about the way that the game went and the issues that we had, particularly in that first half, could you make the argument that it was a decent point? I suppose you could, but I can't see that right now. The morning after the game, I can't see that. I certainly couldn't see it 5 minutes after the full-time whistle. I just couldn't. I was really frustrated, really, really disappointed. I really, really was. But anyway, let's start breaking the game down then. Just a quick reminder, by the way, if you're watching us on YouTube and you haven't done so already, leave us a like on the video. That really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're new. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or any other major podcast store, make sure you leave us a review and all the rest of it. And if you want to go one further and support us on Patreon, you can do so. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna, and we'll bring you a Patreon piece this evening. So, yeah, I think the Patreon piece is one that I'm still figuring out in terms of what I'm going to base it on, because my emotions this morning are still quite raw. And this is not a headspace that we've been in for a while, right? Where we're trying to kind of differentiate between what's good, what's bad, what are the positives we can take, what can we improve on, because it's been flawless from Arsenal for such a long time. You know, yeah, okay, we've looked at certain games and gone, well, we could have done this better, we could have done that better, we could have improved in that department, whatever. But generally speaking, we've been in such a good place that processing a disappointing result is something we're kind of out of practice with. And so I'm not quite sure which of the negatives, and I say that with quote marks, should be the kind of the takeaway, and whether or not the takeaway should be a negative, or if we should be focused on the fact that we came out after half time and looked a completely different animal and a completely different team. But yeah, we'll see. And Joe says in the chat, better to reflect after the Man City Liverpool result. Yeah, because you can look at it. Let's say that they do draw. Okay, let's say that they do draw. You could look at it and go, well, you know, actually, we came up against a really tough Sunderland side who are going to cause lots of teams problems at the Stadium of Light, unbeaten at the Stadium of Light for good reason so far this season. And you can say we weren't quite at our best in that first half. We've got lots of attacking players missing. Our options were limited. We managed to get a point in the end, which obviously is better than losing. It's not ideal, but it's better than losing. And because of the fact that Manchester City and Liverpool perhaps drew, if that is the way that goes, we haven't done any damage. And so on a weekend where we hit a bit of a brick wall, where we hit against a side that were very, very good and very, very impressive in terms of the way they went about playing us, we didn't do any damage. And you can look at that, you can frame that as a positive, or you can say, well, no, man, those two drew. And if we had beaten Sunderland, we'd be much further ahead and we'd look far more comfortable and all the rest of it. So you can package things up in whatever way you want. And that's the beauty of football analysis, I think. You know, people have opinions, and opinions sort of vary, and that's absolutely fine. I just think a lot of it depends on kind of how you look at things in general. And for me, if Manchester City and Liverpool draw later today, I'm going to look at it and go, we got away with that. It's a good thing. Let's move on, and we go again after the international break. If Manchester City win and eat into our lead, more so than Liverpool, because obviously City are just that point closer, then I'm going to go, not a great weekend. We have to dust ourselves off and we have to go again. If Liverpool win, again, I think it's better than Manchester City winning. But again, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to go, well, we've allowed one of those teams when on paper they had a tougher fixture than us to eat into our lead. But then there were weeks where, we weren't expected to extend the lead and we did. Okay, so it swings and roundabouts and it's going to be that way between now and the end of the season. That's just the way it goes. Let's start with the first half. In fact, let's start with the team selection. I don't think you can fault Mikel Arteta for the team selection. I've seen a lot of people question how late he made changes, the changes that he didn't make, etc., etc. But I don't think that you can really have too much of a moan about the team he went with. I think when you look at who we've got available to us, I think that was the way to go. I sort of toyed with the idea of playing Leandro Trossard up front. In the end, he went with Mikel Merino. And I think given how physical that game was, I think actually that was the right decision. So we start the first half with obviously Raya in goal. We've got Timber at right back, Saliba, Gabriel Calafiori across the back, Zubimendi, Rice, and Eze in midfield with Saka right, Trossard left, and Mikel Merino through the middle. My worry and my concern was that if we struggled to break Sunderland down, which was certainly the case in the first half, what did we have on the bench that could potentially turn the game for us? And I really like Ethan Nwaneri. I rate him. And at halftime, there was a part of me thinking Ethan Nwaneri probably needs to come on at some stage, if for nothing else, for his ability to turn, swivel on the edge of the box and get shots off. That made me think, maybe he's the one to kind of look to. Max Dowman, brilliant player. You always have that thing with Max Dowman that he might dribble you into the box and win a penalty kick, which could be very, very significant. But the guy's 15 years old, and how much should I be expecting from him? And Andre Harry-Mananous is 17 years old. And again, similarly to Max Dowman, looks like a really good talent, but how much can you realistically expect from these kids? And that was legitimately how I saw it. And so I was worried before the game that we might not have kind of what it takes to turn the game if we're not the ones to go in front. And so to see Arsenal go behind the way we did and then respond the way we did and ultimately get back in front, that goes in the positive column at least, because we showed that with limited options, the players that we had on the pitch were able to step up and make a contribution. But on Sunderland, they were physical, really physical. They were well organized. They held a fantastic shape. And, they limited us quite a bit in that first half. And uncharacteristically, we concede a really soft goal. Now, there's a few talking points from that first half. Not many, but there is a few. The first one is Dan Ballard's elbow into the side of Mikel Merino's head. That, for me, is a foul. If that happens in the centre circle, if a player trying to get on the right side of his man in the centre circle swings out an elbow like that and catches the guy, bang, in the side of the head, the referee blows the whistle, and he gives a free kick, and he maybe refers it, or the VAR maybe steps in and has a good look at that. But for some reason, because it was in the penalty box, there was no desire, by the looks of it, for anyone to even delay the game long enough to have a good look at it and make sure that what they thought they'd seen was what actually took place. And the more you watch it, the worse it gets. Because there will be people that go, oh, well, Dan Ballard, he's just naturally putting his arm up there to get position. You don't need to raise your arm that high to make a movement. Like, do you know what I mean? And so if he swung his arm sort of lower and he catches Merino in the chest or whatever, I go, fine. The fact that his arm's up there, for me, makes that something that's worthy of a review. I don't know if a review went on behind the scenes, but we certainly weren't kind of notified of any significant delay or any sort of significant check. But I was really, really frustrated by that. Again, let me be clear. I'm not making an excuse. I'm not saying that that's why we didn't win the game. But it kind of set the tone, I think, for what Sunderland were allowed to get away with, particularly in that first half, from a physical point of view. There's Craig Pawson, allowing that, him and his VAR officials, allowing that to go unpunished, allowing that to go by. And when it does, as a Sunderland player who's probably been briefed and wound up pre-kickoff to really get stuck into Arsenal and all the rest of it, you probably think, right, well, I can push the line now. I can push that boundary because guess what? Dan Ballard's just elbowed Mikel Merino in the side of the head and he's absolutely fine. No one's going to take any action. Now, I'm not even saying, by the way, that it should be a red card or that we should have definitely 100% got a penalty. But the fact that it was swept under the carpet so quickly and so easily, I think emboldened Sunderland in their approach. Because you're looking at it and you're going, well, if I can get away with that, I can get away with a lot. And so you saw them, I think, get increasingly more physical with us as that half went on. Then obviously Sunderland score. And the big frustration for me here is threefold, right? So I'm annoyed at the fact that they were given the free kick in the first place, because for me, Martin Zubimendi gets the ball. He clearly gets the ball. Not only does he get the ball and have a free kick incorrectly awarded against him, but he also goes into the referee's book, which I think is quite frankly ridiculous. When you consider that Reynildo had committed about 6 or 7 fouls, at least that's how many it felt like, before the referee even considered reaching for the pocket. You could argue that what Zubimendi did was cynical, but guess what? He got the ball, so it wasn't. So I was really, really frustrated by that. Really frustrated by that. And then it's a long direct ball into our penalty area. And normally you're looking at Arsenal and you're going, this is our bread and butter nowadays. You know, we can handle this. This is not a problem for us. And I kind of watched it again and again and again. And obviously the long ball comes in and Dan Ballard is a unit, man. He's an absolute unit. And you know what? Put yesterday to one side for a minute. He came through at Arsenal. There were high hopes for him. It never kind of materialized for him as a first teamer at Arsenal, but he's gone on to have a pretty decent career and he's doing really well for Sunderland at the moment. So there's no sour grapes here. Like, congratulations to him, man. He's doing brilliantly. And he even spoke about his kind of connection with Arsenal after the game. But because he gets up early as that ball comes towards him, he sort of pins Declan Rice down, meaning that Rice can't really challenge. But for me, that's not the bit I'm disappointed with Rice about. Where I'm a little bit disappointed is that once Rice realizes he's lost that duel, and then it goes into a sort of slightly deeper position, and then there's a knockdown, which Ballard then gets onto, I want to see Rice react quicker. Now, I know Rice is coming from a static position versus Ballard, who's coming from a moving position. But I think, I think Rice has got to be quicker to anticipate, what Ballard's going to do. He's going to charge into that space, or to at least think, I've missed out on the initial duel. I've now got to drop in and I've got to cover that space. And I don't think Declan Rice does that quickly enough, reacts quickly enough. There'll be people out there that will say I'm being really harsh and I'm being overly critical of Declan Rice, but I hold him in such high regard that my standards for him are up here. And from a defensive perspective, I've always thought that Declan Rice is among the very best midfielders in the game. So, yeah, a little bit disappointed with that. But credit to Ballard. I mean, the touch and the finish are just unbelievable. And I think if you give him that chance 10 times, he blazes it over the bar, 9 of them. So we're a little bit unfortunate with the way that he sort of rifles that into the back of the net. And then you go in at halftime and you look at how little time the ball's been in play and how stop-start it's been. And I got to say, I was a little bit worried because I'm thinking, how do we break this lot down? How do we open this lot up? How do we create a sufficient amount of chances to turn this game around? And we come out after the break, no changes. And I was pleasantly surprised because guess what? We'd figured it out. And you're not always going to be able to predict what you're going to face down to a T in every game. If it was that simple and it was that easy, then this wouldn't be the most difficult league in the world. But it is for a reason, because there is so much variety to what kind of teams can do, how they approach football matches. You look at someone like Sunderland, who's come up from the Championship. Most people, when they saw Sunderland come up through the playoffs, would have predicted them to go straight back down. And what did they do? They went out in the summer. They spent big money. They brought in some really good players. They've got a really smart coach who's adaptable. And And here they are competing with everybody. I mean, they're third in the league at the moment. And I took issue with a few sort of comments that I saw on social media. I say take issue. I mean, I didn't lose any sleep over it. But my point is, there was a few people saying, this is a promoted side. And Arsenal have dropped points to a promoted side. And you can't do that if you're going to win the league. And of course, factually, Sunderland are a promoted side, right? But I think that's an unfair way of describing them right now. They're not like promoted sides of the past 4 or 5 years who have come up, who have been completely toothless, who haven't invested any money, who have been quite happy to just be in the mix for survival come the back end of the season. No, Sunderland are sitting third in the Premier League. Third in the Premier League, and we're over a quarter of the way through the season. So, you can't sit there and go, it's Arsenal dropping points to a promoted side and then overblowing the failure, in your opinion, on that basis, because that does not tell the story of where Sunderland are at right now. But in the second half, we came out with a purpose, with a greater tempo, and Calafiori and a couple of others have come out after the game and said stuff like, Mikel Arteta told us at halftime that we had to win our duels to be able to play our game. And it sounds really basic and really simplistic, but actually, when you think back to the way that the first half unfolded, that's bang on the money. We weren't winning enough of our duels. We weren't physically dominant enough to be able to play our game. But when the second half begun, you could feel that Arsenal had upped it. And I knew 5 minutes into the second half, no word of a lie, my little boy was watching it next to me. And he said, Dad, do you think we're going to come back? And I said 5 minutes into the second half, we're going to score. We're going to score. We're going to be fine. Now, obviously, I didn't anticipate that we'd get caught out defensively in the 94th minute, but you could see that Arsenal had upped it so much that it was only a matter of time. Arsenal scoring was inevitable. And the first goal comes from Arsenal pressing really, really high. I think it was Lefay who was dispossessed by Rice. Eze, quick, simple, concise pass into Merino. Merino doesn't mess about with it. Tees up Saka, who'd had a couple of sighters, by the way, before that, and produces this unbelievable finish. Now, you might be saying, well, it's not a great finish. The keeper's been beaten at his near post, etc., etc. I beg to differ, and here's why I beg to differ. Because Bukayo Saka, if you watch it again, I think gets sent a little bit wider than he would have liked. A little bit wider than he would have liked by Mikel Merino. And then he has to sort of wrap his right boot, which is his weaker foot, by the way, around it so that in setting it slightly outside of the near post, it bends in just in the nick of time, which means that he squeezed it just inside that near post and made it really, really difficult for the goalkeeper. You can look at it over and over again and you can say the goalkeeper got to do better near post. And generally speaking, I tend to agree goalkeepers shouldn't be beaten there. But when you watch that finish again, you see how impressive it is. He's sent slightly wider than he would have liked, Bukayo Saka. And then he manages to wrap his boot around it enough to just add that spin on the shot that means that it just creeps inside. And so it's not a glaring error by the goalkeeper. In fact, it's a fantastic finish from Bukayo Saka. And then it's 1-1. And all of a sudden, the momentum is with us. The impetus is with us. And you're thinking, come on, Arsenal, we can go on and win this. There's plenty of time in which to do that. And you start to feel good. And the game starts to get away from Sunderland. It really, really did at that point. But I'll explain after the break what I think happened after we got the second goal, which we'll talk about in detail as well when we return. We're going to take a really short pause. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner pod. Don't go anywhere. Be back in just a moment.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you're with us on YouTube, whether you're watching us live or if you're watching this back a little bit later on, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or any other major podcast store, make sure you're subscribed and you give us a review. And if you want to go one further, you can check us out on Patreon. There's a bonus bit of content that will be coming your way a little bit later on. In fact, this evening, once the day's football has concluded. So we're 1-1. Rice pressing high, giving it absolutely everything from an effort perspective. Merino tees up Saka, outstanding finish. We have a chance that Zubimendi sort of drags just wide, which was a difficult chance after a really smart and intelligent pass from Leandro Trossard. We have Zubimendi's effort that comes back off the bar after the ball breaks to him on the edge of the box, and he takes the touch and then volleys towards goal. And at that point, you feel like Arsenal are huffing and puffing. And the question was, can they kick that Sunderland door down? And eventually they do. Eventually they do. They work the ball out left to Leandro Trossard. Lovely little drop of the shoulder. Comes inside. You can't let Leandro Trossard come inside like that. And he literally rifles one past the goalkeeper into the roof of the net. It's an outstanding finish. And at that point, I'll be honest with you, I thought it was done. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, this is huge. This is massive. This is really, really big in terms of making a statement. We've had a really bad first half where we haven't been able to play our game whatsoever. Obviously, some things have been tweaked and adjusted at half time. Even if it was something as simple as saying, you got to win your duels so that you can play your game. Even if that's all that was said, it was enough because it put Arsenal on the right path and our superior quality began to show. And we were 2-1 up, but at that point, we could have been 4 or 5-1 up. And that was the only kind of regret. And where I suppose people are going to be critical of Arsenal is in saying, well, when you had that momentum, when you had that bit between your teeth, why didn't you keep going in the same vein? Sunderland were completely up against it and go and try and completely take the game away from them and kill them off and make it 3, and that would be job done. Is there an argument that Arsenal's defensive brilliance of late caused them to go into a mindset of, well, we've got our noses in front now. We know we're good enough defensively to see this out. So let's take our foot off the gas and instead not take any risks. And the only change that Mikel Arteta made, which kind of backs up this argument, I'm not sure that I fully believe this argument, but the only change that he makes is Eze off for Christian Mosquera. Now, people have said, well, it's a really negative change, blah, blah, blah. It was made on the 88th minute, for God's sake. So it was never going to really have too big an impact on the way that the game then developed, was it? It was just Arsenal trying to shut up shop. And if you can't shut up shop on 88 minutes, then can you ever shut up shop, I suppose? So I didn't really take issue with that. But I suppose where I was a little bit frustrated was that in the build-up to that, when it felt like Sunderland after the goal, so Trossard scores on 74. After that, there were a few moments that Sunderland had, and obviously David Raya was called into action, and there were periods and points where we had our backs against the wall a little bit, and there was an argument to say, bring some fresh legs on, because I watched players literally run out of gas in an instant. In order to win the duels and do all of the things that Mikel Arteta had clearly asked for at the break, they had to empty the energy tank, man. And there were some players that were literally finished. There was I never see Declan Rice look tired. I never see Declan Rice sort of waning in his ability and his power to run. But there was one instance where he followed someone and he pressed really high, and then he turns around and he's got to run back straight away with no break, no breather, no pause. And you can see Arteta on the touchline sort of urging him to keep going, keep running, keep pushing. And I'm looking at Declan Rice and he just ran out of gas. And listen, this is no criticism of him. This is no criticism of any Arsenal player. We've been down to the bare bones in terms of forward players recently. These players are playing high intensity, very demanding matches every 3 days at the moment. This was always going to happen at some point. And that's why I kept saying that for me, this game was the last real push before that international break, whereby we could then go off and reset. And hopefully we'd come back with at least 3 or 4 of the 7 injured players that we have at the moment, mainly in those attacking areas, would be back and available for us so that we could vary it, so that we could shake it up, so that we could change it and we could freshen it up. So I'm not surprised with the way that it went in the end, but I am disappointed with the nature of the goal that we conceded, because We should have learnt our lesson from the first half. If Sunderland go direct, you've got to defend the second ball better. And we didn't. We didn't. That second goal was shoddy in terms of defending from Arsenal. Now, take nothing away from Brobby. He's a big, strong, powerful lad, and he does brilliantly, and he's acrobatic in his effort and all the rest of it to just divert it past the onrushing David Raya. But Gabriel's completely beaten. He's got no chance of getting anywhere near the ball. And David Raya, in my opinion, makes the wrong decision to come out the way he does. And I don't want to sort of have a pop at Gabby or David Raya because they've both been outstanding all season and they're entitled to one kind of moment where they switch off. And I also appreciate that in those actions, you've literally got a split second to make a decision as to what you're going to do. And you can make the wrong decision when you don't have a clear idea of what's happening around you. You can't predict where the second ball is going to go. That's what makes defending second balls much more difficult than the original delivery into a penalty area, because you don't know, you know roughly if someone sets up to take a free kick against you from the right hand side and midway through your half, you can predict what the angle of the delivery is going to be. And so you can take up a shape and positions that allow you to defend that initial delivery as effectively as possible. Now, that doesn't mean that teams can't score from those initial deliveries, but second balls are unpredictable. And that unpredictability makes it very, very hard to defend them because you don't know where the ball's going to land. How can you position yourself when you've literally got no idea how that ball's going to fall? You could see a delivery come in, set up for the defender or the attacker, I should say, to kind of to head directly towards goal. And then it comes off the side of his head and drops 5 yards to his right. You can't predict that. His header could be deflected off of a defender who's desperately trying to make a block. It can come back off the woodwork. You don't know where it's going to end up. So defending second balls is tough. And I acknowledge that. But I think Arsenal needed to defend that situation better. And I think as much as it was about tired legs at that point in the game, it was about tired minds as well. And this run of clean sheet after clean sheet after clean sheet and win after win after win, it was always going to come to an end. Like, it was never going to continue. We were never going to go on and win every game without ever conceding another goal and cruise to the Premier League title in the way that some people were suggesting. We know that football don't work like that. But I can't help but feel that disappointment and that frustration because we were in a position where we were like, there was 7 minutes added. I think we were 3 minutes away from taking what would have been a massive 3 points and one that I think would have significantly improved our chances of winning the Premier League, regardless of what happens at the Etihad today. Now, there is a chance that the result at the Etihad goes against us and our lead is eaten into. If there's a draw, happy days. And for the record, I'm not going to be watching that game live today. I'm going to be working on a Serie A game. I'm working on Roma this afternoon. So we'll see. I'll catch up with that one a little bit later on, and we'll maybe bring you a Harry Reacts depending on how that goes and what it means for us, etc. But I'm disappointed, but I also take some encouragement from it. I mean, I think the fact that we were able to up it in that second half, but we didn't have the legs to then maintain that, is a consequence of the schedule. It's a consequence of the lack of options in attack. There's no real excuse for it from a defensive point of view because we've got the players to make those changes and to make those rotations, and we just haven't done it. But when you've got a defense that's as solid as that, you don't really want to disrupt it. And people will criticize Mikel for not making more changes. I mean, I look at the bench. Could he have brought on maybe Christian Norgard just to solidify things a little bit in the midfield? Could he have brought on Piero Hincapié? Maybe. Could Ben White have come on? But then Timber was doing brilliantly. I think there are arguments you can make and cases you can make, but I don't think he's done anything criminal as far as I'm concerned, the manager. So I'm not gonna focus on that. I'm not going to focus on that. Laughing Man says, in hindsight, should we have made defensive changes midweek at Prague? Gabriel, Timber, Rice rested. I said this going into the Prague game, and I was completely slaughtered for it. I said that I would make more changes than we ended up making. I don't think you could have left Rice out because Zubimendi was out. And I think that would have really lowered the level in our midfield. So I wouldn't have rested him. But I think you could have left Gabriel out, considering that Saliba was available. I think you could have played White over Timber. I think there were options to do it elsewhere, yes. And I do think if you want to, continue to kind of roll back in order to try and find the reason why we seem to run out of steam and switch off at the end of this game, that's probably it. That's probably it. Rather than it being about necessarily what we did yesterday in terms of changes and substitutions. But look, if people feel that we managed the game poorly in terms of changes yesterday, I also don't strongly disagree with that. I don't. But anyway, okay, let's take another really brief pause. And when we come back, we'll take some of your thoughts and some of your questions. I do want to say, actually, before we go into the Q&A session, obviously Saka, second half, brilliant. First half, non-existent. Eze, I found his performance a little bit disappointing, and not for the first time in recent times. I just don't think he gets involved enough. I think it's all a little bit too casual at times. And I appreciate that he's still adapting and he's learning and he's, developing into a different type of player because he's facing a different challenge at Arsenal. Not writing the guy off, but I want to see more from him. I really, really do. I want to see him take the game by the scruff of the neck that little bit more. It's just not happening at the moment for me in the way that I expected. Who I do want to give praise to and credit to is Leandro Trossard. I thought in the second half, he was incredible. Not only was he responsible for the second goal with a stunning finish, but he played some really clever, smart defense splitting passes at a time when we really needed creativity, and credit to him for his performance. We also had that Calafiori chance right at the end after Sunderland had equalised, where it was saved by the goalkeeper. From that angle, he doesn't really have much choice in terms of what he can do with it. And then it comes to Marino, and Marino you think is going to score, and we're going to all lose our heads and jump up and down and go crazy. And it's blocked by, guess who, Dan Ballard, who was deservedly the man of the match, I think, in terms of his contribution. I'm pretty sure it was he who got the assist for Brobby's goal as well. So yeah, he had a big impact on the game. He did. Guitar Solo says, I thought Eze was your needle mover. I thought he would be too. Haven't seen the level of performances from him that I was expecting. But what it does do is it shuts a lot of the Odegaard haters up, doesn't it? Because Odegaard's always busy, he's always involved. And I feel like if I've got one criticism of Eze, it's not about his quality, it's about that at times I think he's lost a little bit, and I want him to be a bit more involved. Does that mean that he needs to sort of roam a little bit more? Is that then a system thing, and am I unfairly pinning that on him? We don't know, but it's just an opinion. It's just a view. But anyway, short pause. When we come back, we're going to take your questions and thoughts from the live chat. And yeah, we'll do all of that next before we wrap up on today's pod. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Do your thing, like, subscribe, hype, all those things. Leave us a review if you're listening on audio. Okay, let's take some of your questions and some of your thoughts. What have we got? What have we got in the live chat? Laughing Man says, agreed on Norgard, who I think probably should have come on just to give us some fresh legs in the middle of the park. We didn't need to produce anything spectacular at that point. We just needed to be solid. And he says, what's the point of buying Brentford captain if you can't use him at the end of games like this? I agree with that. That would be my criticism. But again, I'll always say this, right? I acknowledge that my criticism is coming from a place of hindsight. I also understand why a manager in the 93rd minute in a game that you're winning with narrow margins like that does not want to risk bringing someone on cold in the heat of that and then potentially making a mistake. Jay says, Eze's a good player. I've always thought he was overrated, but I didn't think Eze would be this anonymous. I don't think he's been anonymous. I think that's overplaying what I've said. I just don't think he's involved in the games as much as I'd like him to be. And I think when you play in a really central 10 position, which is what he's playing at the moment in Odegaard's absence. Now, when Odegaard plays that role, he doesn't play as a 10. He plays more like an 8/10. When you're going to be static in your positioning like Eze is, and it's a central position, it's going to be difficult to get the ball to you. That's the first thing that Sunderland will look to do in terms of trying to stop Arsenal, is shutting down the middle passage. We always talk about that all the time. And so if Eze is just standing in that middle passage and he can't get the ball, then what impact is he going to have on the game? For me, he has to go left. He has to go right. I don't necessarily want to see him come deeper, but I want to see him get closer to the wide players so that he can combine with them and so that he can receive the ball in slightly more space. And then if he wants to carry it in midfield and try and make something happen, all power to him, because he's a brilliant dribbler. But I think that's the issue with him right now. And I don't know if it's an instruction that's like, no, you got to stay central, because that is creating space for the players on the right and left, which is a factor you must consider. But it's not really working in the way that I would have liked it to so far. I have to be honest about that. Sadiq says playing Marino for 90 minutes is not the way. Marino scores goals, but when he presses the opponent's backline, they always have more time on the ball. I don't like it when he starts. I'm not going to slate Mikel Marino for yesterday's performance. I'm just not going to do it. I don't think that it's justified. I think that Mikel Marino would have been left on the pitch because we probably expected a Sunderland onslaught. We probably expected to have to defend some set pieces. And quite frankly, I'd rather have Mikel Marino standing at my near post, looking to head things away and tasked with winning aerial duels than having Ethan Nwaneri do it, with all due respect to him. So I'm not gonna slate Mikel Marino. Zemi says, Harry, Arsenal just need to try and win every game and forget what happens with other teams. We always want to focus on other teams. You can't change what's done, but you can influence what's next. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It is. Theo says, our longest winning run in the league under Arteta is 8 so far. We've not managed double digits yet, which is one of the differences between us, City, and Liverpool. Need to go on a 10+ winning run in the league. Yeah, traditionally you do. In recent years, you would say that is accurate, 100%. But that's if the chasing pack are at that standard and are at that level. Do you see City and Liverpool right now going on a 10-game winning run? I'm not saying they won't or they can't, but do you see it? Because if you don't, then that point doesn't really have that much relevance. You know, I think it's important that given how badly, I say badly, given how well Sunderland started the game yesterday and the troubles that we had, I think the fact that we've got out of there with something over time might be looked back on as a positive. AJ says, what are your thoughts on players resting, the need of a rest during this international break and the Spurs-Chelsea game? How do you think Mikel Arteta should navigate this period? Look, obviously the international stuff is out of his hands. Those players are going to go away on international duty. Hopefully they don't play big parts. And if they do play minutes, they probably don't play high-intensity games. And so you might be okay and you might get away with it. But look, at the end of the day, we face Tottenham next in the Premier League. And if there's one game in the season that you don't need to try and get your players up for, that you don't need to kind of try and lift the mood. And I think this team is more mentally resilient than people give them credit for. So I don't think Mikel Arteta is going to have a massive task on his hands, getting everybody focused and reset and ready to go again. But that game coming up at Emirates Stadium, that's exactly the game you want, isn't it? In terms of, getting people back into the zone and back up for it and all the rest of it. So yeah, I'm fine with that. In terms of how he navigates it, you pick your best team, but you've got to be mindful of the fact that some players are running out of steam a little bit, and you've got to be able to use the squad. The problem is that we haven't been able to use parts of the squad because of the injuries that we've had, and hopefully that eases off a little bit after the break. This is a good this is a really, really good question. From D Dayspring, what's your best attack and midfield combination with all the boys back after the November break? I'm going to say right now, based on current form, I'm going to say it would be Rice, Zubimendi, Odegaard, Saka right, Gyökeres centre forward, and Trossard left on current form. I think Trossard's been outstanding lately. I do. I really, really do. I think he's been great. US Arsenal fan says, Harry, I became a first-time dad on Tuesday. Congratulations to you, my friend. He says, so I'm up very early over here in the States and can listen to you live. Any dad advice for me? Get sleep whenever you can and enjoy it. Enjoy it because, it is a bit of a sort of a drastic change at home. Like your routines go out the window. You're running on empty and all the rest of it. And it's tough when you're juggling work as well. I would always say, but enjoy it because those newborn days, they go very, very quickly. And before you know it, you'll be asking your kid to do something and getting attitude and back chat. So yeah, that would be my advice, but enjoy it, mate. Enjoy the ride. It's the best thing in the world. It really, really is. Pavel Andreev says, what do you make of the refereeing this season? Slightly wider question here. It's not good, but I feel like it's slightly improving. I think it's been better than it was last season. Yeah, I agree with that because I can't think of as many controversial moments this season as we sort of had experience at this same stage last time. Guitar Solo says, with the squad fully fit, be honest with yourself, does Eze start and where? Not on his current form. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Simple question with a simple answer. Just rolling through, just trying to pick out some stuff that that is a little bit different to what we've already covered off. Archangel says, what do you think of Tottenham? I'll tell you what, I'll say this on here. I was commentating on the Tottenham Man United game for BBC London yesterday. I probably shouldn't say this, and certainly during the game, I'm neutral, right? I shouted when Richarlison scored. I shouted when De Ligt scored. But afterwards, when the game was done, I kind of looked at it and I went, oh, kind of glad I didn't commentate over a Tottenham victory there. But that's for obvious reasons. But look, I'll be honest. When I'm in the zone and I'm doing the game, that goes out the window. It does. It does. It has to do that job. And I think I've found the way of sort of switching modes, if you like, when covering games like that, which I needed to do, and I think I've got there now. Let's see what you guys are saying. Lots of people doing lots of arithmetic, trying to figure out what the consequences of yesterday might look like come the end of the season, etc., etc. But I don't think you can look that far ahead. I think this is the Premier League. There are surprises at every turn, and you've got to be able to reset after a disappointing result like that. I mean, we won 10 games on the trot in all comps, guys. Like, to draw one is not the end of the world, is it? I just think it's the nature of the draw. It's the fact that we were ahead on 93 minutes that's made it quite difficult for people to process. And I think over time, we might look back on it and go, not that it was a good result, because when you're winning at that stage, it can't be a good result. But I do think there'll come a point where we look back at that and we go, maybe it wasn't as bad as it felt the morning after, is kind of my point there. Right, I am going to love you and leave you all. Thank you so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate all the support. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. Check us out on Patreon. There'll be a Patreon pod coming your way tonight. And I will see you all very, very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. 2 points dropped or a point gained. You can look at it whatever way you want. I can't help but feel that I'm disappointed above anything else. But we dust ourselves off and we go again. There's no need for overreaction. There's no need to overanalyze either. It was just one of those days. And as I said to you guys right at the top of the show, I had that feeling from very, very early on in the game. Sometimes you just know. And so when Arsenal made it 2-1, I was delighted and I was over the moon. I shouldn't be surprised, though, that Sunderland were able to find that equaliser based on how the whole game went and the difficulties and problems that they caused us. I will see you all very, very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful Sunday. If you fancy swerving the Liverpool game later because you can't bear to watch it, you can join me on DAZN. I'm covering Roma. They're playing a little bit later on today, and that clashes with the Man City game. So that's why I won't be watching it. And I'll chat to you all soon. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.